Welcome, everyone. Welcome to June's edition of Timely Tips from the Team. Today I have in my hand a document by Vicki Lynn Marshall. Any of you know who Vicki Lynn Marshall is? I think that's some fun trivia. Actually, this is Vicki Lynn Marshall's will. I just laminated a few pages of her will that I thought would be interesting for people to see. Now, for those of you who don't know who Vicki Lynn Marshall is, she is the late Anna Nicole Smith. And what most people don't realize is if you really wanted to, you could go to California, LA actually, to the public trustee's office and pull up all of Anna Nicole Smith's will if you really were nosy like I am and wanted to know what was inside of her will. That's actually true for everyone. I don't know if the average person realizes the documents in a will are public information available to you from the public trustee's office. So we're going to actually talk about a lot of the myths and the traps of wills. This month is June, and June, hopefully the weather's getting nicer. It's also estate planning month, and because it's estate planning month, the team thought very strongly it was a really important month to talk about all the issues having to do with estate planning. So what we're going to cover today is why people don't have wills, why wills are public information, what documents you need when a person dies, how we need to start talking about what's actually in the will with our families, a really, really crucial topic for family harmony. So, in case you're one of those people who don't want your family to have the opportunity to go to the public trustee's office and read up on what's in your will, like Anna Nicole Smith, then we're also going to talk about how you can make your estate private. So stay tuned for timely tips from the team. So Sharon, welcome.
Thanks.
Great to have you here. I think this is a really important topic. I'm glad that we're in June and it's estate planning month. Hopefully the weather will get better too. But why is it, I know you talk to clients as they're entering the practice, why is it that people just don't want to get a will done? 56% of Canadians don't have a will.
It's a really high percentage, that's for sure. I think a lot of it is avoidance. They don't think they're going to pass away, and so they think they've got lots of time on the clock, and they just don't want to put it down on paper. They don't want to put that process down and think about it.
Yeah, I think it's an existential crisis for people, just thinking about, first of all, dying, or even with a power of attorney, getting sick. It's just that feeling of, losing control. Do you see that when you talk to people?
I do. It's like people don't want to buy certain kinds of insurance because they think everything's going to be okay. It's the same thing for a will, I just think that I will do it. I'll get to that. And there's so many other things that get in the way, and they think it's very expensive. So then they think, oh, it's another factor.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, that feeling of losing control is a really big deterrent. Mm-hmm. But the question then becomes, do you lose more control if you already find yourself in that circumstance and you didn't have anything prepared, your family doesn't know necessarily what your wishes are, or do you lose more control when you actually have told people you're intentional about your circumstances and you've told people what you want, if you're sick or you pass away, where you want your money to go? Often I find people tell me when they do complete their will, they get this sense of peace and they feel a sense of accomplishment about putting everything that they actually want to happen in writing.
You're right, and I've got a great example of that. Is my uncle put this off for almost 7 or 8 years, and I kept reminding him every year, saying, you gotta get this done, you gotta get this done. He's like, putting it off mainly because it cost, anticipated cost, and thinking about that demise, like what's gonna happen, and how do I think about this, and how do I put on the will? He finally did it, and he said the relief on him and the self of accomplishment, like just it's there, it's done, and he looked back and it wasn't that expensive.
Well,
Really
let's talk a
wasn't.
little bit about that, because I think, some of the objections, and maybe you've found this too when you've talked to people when they say, I'm ready to do a financial plan, or I'm ready to get organized around my finances. Some of the things that they might give you as feedback is, I haven't done the will because I think the lawyer might be expensive, it's going to be too complicated. Let's talk about fees. Like, what did your uncle, or what's the average cost?
It's about $400.
Mhm.
So, it wasn't too bad at all. I mean, that's a pretty average. And he tried to look at doing just like a basic, Staples will kit, but that's pretty complicated if you want to really put it all on paper. He wrote it on paper, said who do I want to address it to and who do I want to will to, and then the lawyer did it for him, and it was all properly done.
Right.
And
Yeah,
documented.
and I think in particular, people in second marriages, people with children, basically children in second marriages, who they might have different ideas on where their assets should go because they have children and now they're in a second marriage. Things become really complicated. You simply cannot afford to use a Staples will kit. And you really want to at least consult a lawyer, especially if it's affordable.
Absolutely.
To get a will done.
And talking about the power of attorney, you got to get that in place because, there's wishes you want to put in place there, so the family's not guessing. Everybody has a different take on things. And so if you voice it, and then they know what they want you, they know what you want to do when the time comes, and everyone's not going, oh, my heart is touching, I don't know what to do about this. It was already laid out on paper.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you, Sharon, is, I think the biggest obstacle for people to overcome is that existential crisis.
Yeah, I agree.
Is really looking at the relief you'll get rather than the anxiety you feel of getting it done. Would it feel better to know that, you, especially if you have children, that that the children have a guardian that you've put down on paper,
Yes.
that you because the problem is if you don't have things in place, then the law determines, Family Law Act determines
That's
where
right.
your assets will go.
Uh-huh.
So it's having the control versus not having the control, and that sense of relief that you'll find, because getting a will done is actually affordable. What we have, one of the things our team offers is something called a will workbook. So if you want to start putting all of your assets on paper, putting everything together, we have a estate planning document to think through. We have a power of attorney for care and assets sheet that we can pass on to you, and we'll pass all of that to you in our
It's
in
been
the
very
link.
helpful.
Yeah, so we'll put it in the link for this month's newsletter so that people can start looking at ways they can start putting this together. So thank you so much, Sharon.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate this information. I know our community will as well.
Yep, great information.
Thank you. Okay. So Nydia, welcome back, Miss Busy Bee.
Thank you.
I want to talk to you about, we're in estate planning month, it's June, and I think a lot of times I find when someone dies, there's still quite a bit of ignorance in terms of what's required, what documents do they need when someone dies. So could you sort of speak to when people call in and they've expressed, we've lost a couple clients this month, they've expressed that one of our clients had passed away, what type of documents do they need?
So the type of documents you need in order to make claims is a will, and that will needs to either be an original copy or it needs to be a notarized copy,
Okay.
as well as the death certificate. Those
Okay.
are the two main documents that's needed when making claims.
Excellent. Now, do you find that, if we're trying to prepare clients ahead of time, do you find that people are often organized? For example, an executor coming in, do they know what assets the deceased actually has with CART? Like, let's speak to how we can prepare clients so that if an executor calls, that they have a sense of where their assets are.
A lot of times, no, the executor doesn't know where everything is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not even the executor. Sometimes it's a spouse that calls in and doesn't know where everything is. And they're calling in and they're asking me to get all the accounts that the client had with us, whether it's insurance or investments, and to send them copies of all the statements or insurance policies or whatever to them so that they do know what the other person had.
Okay, and how will we address that? How have we addressed if clients are calling, the deceased family is calling and want to know where things are. And how should people be approaching, like planning ahead of time so that when they pass away, people can easily figure out where their assets are. They don't have to become detectives, which nobody wants to do when someone dies. What are some strategies? What are some things that we can do as a firm who's really trying to help clients through that process? What are some things you recommend?
So one strategy is to keep all your documents together. So have your death certificate, not your death certificate.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Sorry, have your will. There's also should be a rights and things document so that.
So speak to that. So a rights or things will, just for the general community that listens to us, is really a will that spells out what your personal effects are and who you're leaving them to. Because often, again, your family might fight over that. Sometimes people think it's the major assets, like the finances, that people are fighting over. But sometimes it's mom's, armchair that she always sat in that they want, or jewelry that was passed down in the family that people fight over. So, have a personal effects document that outlines who should get what, just to, again, encourage family harmony.
Right. And so you can have that all together. We also recommend we provide asset summary sheets to clients that has a list of all their insurance policies and investments. You can keep one of those sheets along with your will as well. And keep them all together. Let your executor know where those documents are. And even if you wanted to, you can digitally send a copy over to the executor so that they have a copy of their own as well.
Exactly. And, again, finally, even something like, I've heard recently of something called a last letter, which is not something I speak about a lot, but a last letter. So if we're talking about documents that should be together, it should be the will, it should be the rights or things will, it should be obviously at this point you would have passed away, but you should have a power of attorney, which Sharon spoke about. And then the last letter just sort of says what your final wishes are. So your final wishes could be, I want to be cremated, I want a funeral, this is the songs I want played at my funeral. I've had people do last letters that say, this is the dress I want to be in, I want a closed casket, I want an open casket. You just sort of put all of those things together so people don't have to guess. Again, nobody likes being a detective or figuring out what you want if you don't tell them. So tell them, talk, speak openly to your family about these things. So thank you so much for bringing this information to light, Nydia, and I look forward to seeing you next month on next month's Timely Tips. So Nancy.
Good morning, Jackie.
The advocate of our team. We're talking again this month about estate planning, and I think you had some really cool things when we talked on the phone about it with respect to documenting who should be on these important assets that you have. So I wanted to have you speak to that. Talk about the documents that people need to name their beneficiaries or name their loved ones on, and why that's important.
It's very important, Jackie, to have named beneficiaries on all of your registered money. And that avoids it going through your estate and hence probate. So on your TFSA, your RSP, to have first your spouse, so it flows tax-free to your spouse on your death, is very important. And then, of course, having a named beneficiary on your life insurance policy, that also avoids it going through your estate.
Yeah, and you know what? The more you can have things go directly to whoever your named beneficiary is, or in the case of TFSAs, your successor owner, as the more you can have the actual information documented, the easier it is for your executor dealing with your affairs. So that's a really important tip.
Yes, it is.
And I think this goes back to really the importance of thinking this through, thinking about your estate, thinking it through, sort of planning what you want to have happen so that you can have control. I think one of the major reasons that people are reluctant to talk about these things is that conversation they don't necessarily want to have with themselves about their estate, about what they want to see happen, about determining who in their family should get what. And I think, I don't know if you found in your own experiences, Nancy, that people just are reluctant to talk about death, talking about what happens when they pass away, thinking through what should happen to their assets. And I just wanted to have you speak to that a little bit.
You know, I've seen this very often over the years where clients have not done the proper planning, especially with their powers of attorney. You know, it's important to make these decisions while you're still able to, because too often a client has gotten ill and can't make the decisions any longer, and the family's really at a loss without having that power of attorney on file. It gives the family a sense of relief, a sense of control that they now can look after their parent. So it's very important to have those in place.
Yeah, and you know what, the transparency, right? So if people are talking about what's, you know, scenarios where they might lose control of their health or lose control of their assets because they're not, you know, mentally or physically capable, or they've passed on where they have no control. If they talk these things through with their families, it really does a lot for family harmony.
It does.
I've always found that the hardest scenarios I've dealt with is something I call deathbed planning, which is now I'm in a hospital bed talking to somebody about their finances, about what they want to have happen if something happens to their health and they can't make decisions. And it puts just so much more pressure on the situation. Tensions are high with their family. I encourage you to do everything you can to avoid deathbed planning. It's the worst type of planning. It's the least exciting planning that I do, because people feel that, you know, their circumstances are more imminent, and it just puts so much more pressure. And the way they might think about their circumstances already in that situation would be different than they would if they had, you know, time and space and levity to look at it a little bit differently. So one of the books I wanted to bring back into the fold was Willing Wisdom, which is how to talk to your family about what you want in your estate. And I can't encourage you enough to buy this book. It's by a friend of mine, Tom Deans, and he talks in depth, if you're a business owner, if you're an individual who has no will, what you need to do to put things together, how you can teach your children to create the kind of purposeful life, purposeful will that you want for yourself. So check it out. Nancy, was there anything else you wanted to add? I think we wanted to talk about, for people who may not necessarily want to be public about their affairs, sometimes circumstances don't allow for that, and I don't know if you've run into any of those circumstances yourself with clients. I certainly have, where you know, they don't necessarily, as I had mentioned earlier in the video, that sometimes people aren't comfortable with their wills being public information, and wills are public information. How do we avoid, so for the people who might not necessarily, and I find, you know, high net worth people are very, very private. They don't necessarily want their assets to be seen. They don't want everybody to know what's contained in their will. They want to keep the privacy. What are some things that they can do?
That's a good question, Jackie. So we see a lot of very high net worth clients who don't want to have their assets public. So there's a few things that they can do, and one of them is create a trust, and those assets automatically flow through to a trust, and is kept private. It's outside of the will. The other option is segregated funds, which is an investment within an insurance policy. And a lot of people who have, you know, different family situations really like that segregated fund option. It's a great investment. It flows through to the beneficiary privately. No one needs to know about it. It doesn't go through the will, doesn't go through probate. So it's a great option.
And it's a very affordable option too. So, you know, I think this is a really good time to say it's really important for people to be clear on who they are and what they want. And, you know, if circumstances happen that they can't control, that they have a plan. So really, I'm grateful that you brought this information to our community. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thanks, Jackie.
There is power in documenting what you want, documenting what your wishes are, documenting what your intentions are. That's the only way that you can really avoid what I call unintended consequences. So I encourage you to feel free to make use of all the resources that we have available. You know, we have a will workbook, we have a power of attorney workbook, we have an estate planning guideline if you want to sort of think through what you want to have contained in your will. We really believe in the power of intention and putting what you want to happen in place so that you can avoid all of the perils that go with not having a will done and passing away, not having a power of attorney done and getting sick, creating the circumstances that you want to see happen. And we're here to support. Feel free to reach out to us if there's questions that you have about your will or getting one in place. If you want referrals, we have a list of estate planning lawyers. We're happy to refer to you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to this community. We're here to serve, and we're just happy to have your ear this month. Have a great rest of the day.